Daniel had always been a man who believed in stability. He had a steady job at a well-known company, a small but comfortable home, and a family who depended on him. Every morning, he would wake up early, go to work, and return home with a sense of accomplishment. Life, in his eyes, was predictable, safe, and under control. But one day, without warning, everything changed. The company he had served loyally for over a decade suddenly went bankrupt. Daniel received the call that he had been laid off, along with hundreds of others. Shock, disbelief, and fear rushed through him in waves. This wasn't just losing a job, it was losing the foundation of his life. At first, Daniel tried to remain calm. He thought, "I'll find something else quickly. Things will settle." But as days turned into weeks, rejection after rejection crushed his confidence. His savings, which he had carefully accumulated over the years, began to shrink. Bills piled up, debts mounted, and creditors started calling daily. Each call reminded him of what he had lost. The stress was unbearable. Even his friends and family, though supportive, could not fully understand the depth of his despair. Daniel felt isolated, as though the world had moved on while he was stuck in a nightmare he couldn't wake from. Daniel's days became a struggle for survival. He started skipping meals to save money. Simple tasks like paying the electricity bill or buying groceries became monumental challenges. At night, he would lie awake in a silent apartment, haunted by questions of failure. Where did I go wrong? How did I end up here? His mind replayed memories of past successes and the respect he once had at work, making the present even more painful. The contrast between his past security and current vulnerability was unbearable. His self-esteem, once strong, was now fragile and fragile. He tried to reach out for help, contacting friends and old colleagues. Some offered sympathy, others gave advice that seemed out of reach, and a few were indifferent. Each attempt at help seemed to highlight just how alone he truly was. Daniel began to question himself, wondering if he had failed not just professionally, but as a person. This inner conflict, between the desire to fight and the temptation to give up, dominated his days. He knew he could not give up completely, yet every setback seemed heavier than the last. Amid this darkness, there were small moments of clarity. He remembered the values he had always believed in: hard work, perseverance, and honesty. These thoughts sparked tiny flickers of hope, though they were often smothered by fear and despair. Daniel realized that his situation could define him in one of two ways: he could let it destroy him, or he could try to rebuild, step by step. However, the path forward was unclear. Each morning brought a new wave of challenges, from finding food to managing finances, from dealing with the judgment of society to confronting his own self-doubt. By the end of this period, Daniel was exhausted, mentally and physically. He had faced rejection, poverty, and isolation, yet deep inside, a small, persistent voice whispered that life could still change. This section sets the stage for his transformation. The audience sees the weight of his loss, feels the raw emotions of despair, and begins to empathize with his struggle. It creates a strong emotional hook, preparing viewers for the next stage of his journey, the rebuilding of a life that seemed lost forever. After months of despair and struggle, Daniel realized that surviving was not enough, he needed to rebuild. The first step was changing his mindset. He started small, setting simple daily goals like applying for one job each day, going for a short walk, or reading a book to learn a new skill. At first, these small actions felt meaningless against the enormity of his problems, but gradually, they gave him a sense of control. Daniel began to understand that rebuilding his life would not happen overnight. It required patience, consistent effort, and belief in himself, even when circumstances seemed hopeless. One day, he reached out to Mr. Harris, an old mentor who had guided him in his early career. Mr. Harris didn't offer solutions, but he asked questions that made Daniel reflect on his strengths and passions. He reminded Daniel of his resilience, creativity, and ability to adapt. This guidance sparked a new perspective. Rather than focusing on what he had lost, Daniel started to think about what he could create. Encouraged, he took on odd jobs, volunteered in the community, and slowly built new connections. Each small success, whether paying a bill on time or learning a skill that impressed an employer, became a building block of confidence. Emma, his longtime friend, continued to offer emotional support. She celebrated his tiny victories, reminded him of his worth, and encouraged him to keep moving forward. Their conversations became a source of motivation, showing Daniel that support and connection were essential in overcoming hardships. He realized that rebuilding was not just about money or career, it was about restoring dignity, hope, and purpose. As months passed, Daniel's efforts started to bear fruit. He discovered a passion for creating handcrafted furniture, something he had always enjoyed but never considered as a career. Starting with a small workshop in his garage, he began crafting pieces for friends and neighbors. Each finished product not only brought income but also pride. Clients appreciated the quality and care in his work, and slowly word spread. Daniel's confidence grew, as did his sense of control over his destiny. The man who had once felt powerless was now shaping his future with his own hands. Challenges did not disappear completely. There were days of doubt, slow sales, and lingering fear of failure. But Daniel had learned to face these obstacles differently. Instead of giving up, he analyzed problems, adapted, and persisted. The failures that once crushed him became lessons that guided his actions. He became resilient, not because life had spared him pain, but because he chose to rise each time he fell. Finally, Daniel reached a point where he could look back at his journey with pride. He had rebuilt financial stability, regained self-respect, and, most importantly, discovered inner strength he never knew existed. His story became an inspiration to others, proof that no matter how deep the fall, perseverance, courage, and determination can turn despair into triumph. The moral was clear: life may take everything away, but with resilience and consistent effort, it can also give a second chance to rebuild, grow, and succeed. Audiences are left motivated to face their own challenges, believing that setbacks are not the end but a beginning of something stronger.